All right, this is the first introduction to an online lab that we're going to have, and basically it's just a um, we're going to go over a couple types of muscle cells, and then we're going to introduce the first groups of muscles that you'll have to know for the lab. So our first slide is on skeletal muscle cells and their structures. These are things we've had in lecture, and in the lab we have a model, and of course we would have some slides for us to look at here. But remember, these are kind of unique cells. They all have more than one nucleus because they're such large cells, and most of them that are aerobic will have lots of mitochondria. They have a specialized cell membrane called the sarcolemma, which has a junction with neurons. They're shown in the middle part of the illustration there. That's the motor end plate, where an axon meets up with a receptive surface of the muscle cell, and neurotransmitters can trigger action potentials there. Okay, once those things are triggered, you'll have ion channels open, and they'll spread an action potential across the surface of the membrane of the muscle cell. Okay, that surface will carry the impulse to transverse tubules, which are located always near the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, we also have, for comparison, another type of muscle tissue, smooth muscle. And in this case, there's no striations. The actin and myosin and thin and thick filaments are arranged between dense bodies, and the cell can contract in different ways. It can contract lengthwise, but it can also contract in a more angular way. And so these dense bodies are attached to intermediate filaments that are part of the cytoskeleton. And so you don't see a regular arrangement of fibers, but what you see looks like these kind of crisscross arrangements. Okay, then from muscle cells, we go to muscles as organs. Muscles contain a lot of skeletal muscle tissue, but they also contain a lot of connective tissues. These connective tissues surround the muscle, they divide it, and they surround individual cells, so that allows the cells to move independently. The epimysium covers the whole muscle, the perimysium divides it into bundles, and endomysium divides it into individual cells. The belly of the muscle is where there is the greatest amount of skeletal muscle tissue. These are the fibers, and this is where the largest cross section of the muscle is, and where contraction is strongest. And then at the either end of the muscle, there will be a tendon, which is basically all connective tissue. And the origin is the part that doesn't move, and the insertion is the part that does move. Okay, and so here's just a picture of a skeletal muscle contracting. The origin there of the biceps is off the scapula. The insertion is on the radius. The radius moves, and that causes the elbow to flex. And then on the opposite side is the antagonist. That's the muscle that has the opposing action, in this case, the triceps. It again goes from the scapula, but here now the insertion goes on the back side of the arm and attaches to the olecranon process. Okay, so a good example of muscles as organs. We also want to just remind you that muscles, their names generally mean something. And often if you know the name of the muscle, you know quite a bit about it. It tells you often the location of the muscle, whether it's on the chest or the arm, its size, maximus, major, longest. Those all refer to large or long muscles. And then sometimes the muscles just say where they come from and where they go to. The sternocleidomastoid comes from the sternum and clavicle. Cleido means clavicle, and mastoid is a process on the temporal bone. Okay. Shape, deltoid, quadratus, teres are shapes. The fibers, rectus, that means having straight fibers, oblique at an angle. There are some muscles that have more than one head, so often they'll get the name biceps or triceps, and then they'll often be named for what structure they're attached to, and sometimes it'll name their muscle for their function: abductor, adductor, masseter, And so it tells us something about it. So the first set of muscles we're going to know are muscles of facial expression and chewing, and then the muscles of the head and neck. And so on the handout, you'll have to label the following muscles. The occipital frontalis, or just frontalis, that raises the eyebrows. The masseter, a large muscle that attaches to the mandible and is used in chewing. The orbiculus oculi closes the eye, used as in winking. The orbiculus oris goes around the mouth, puckers the lips, as in kissing. Let's see, the levator labii superioris, that raises the upper part of the lips, as in sneering or in an expression of disgust. The zygomaticus major, which raises the corner of the mouth, as in smiling. And the the depressor anguli oris, which depresses the corner of the mouth, as in frowning. I think that's it for those guys. Let's look at them from the front. There's the occipital frontalis, or the frontalis portion, that raises the eyebrows, like in expressions of surprise. Orbiculus oculi, the levator labii superioris, the zygomaticus, orbiculus oris, and the depressor anguli oris. Okay, all right, so those are the muscles of facial expression. Those are important muscles, and they're all innervated by cranial nerves, and so they have kind of a special route directly to the brain, and they're partially involuntary, and so we talked about that in lab. Then there are muscles that move the head and neck. Okay, and this is an anterior surface, and so you can kind of see that a muscle that you could see on the previous slide. Well, let's go back. Or back even one more. On the side there is the sternocleidomastoid, and you can see it goes from just behind the ear to the front of the sternum and the clavicle. When one of these muscles contracts, it will turn the head. When they both contract, it will pull the head forward, kind of flexing the neck. So an important muscle that way. And you can see it here. In this picture here, you see the portions that go to the sternum and the clavicle. It makes that little V in the neck, and then the clavicle portion. Okay. Then the muscles that are antagonistic to this are on the back of the neck, and so here's a posterior view. The trapezius and the splenius capitis are two muscles you have to know. These are muscles that extend the neck and pull the head back when the shoulders are fixed. If the head is fixed in position, these can raise the shoulders. And so they're important muscles that way. The splenius capitis is one of the postural muscles. The trapezius is less often used for posture. Okay, so you've got this series of slides to look at. You have your textbook to look at, and you're going to use those to fill out the handouts. There's a list of these muscles in the handout, and then there's a list of questions that pertain to these muscles. And so you don't have to label muscles that aren't on that list. Okay, there is a movie for us to watch. We'll have a quiz next week, and that quiz will cover both the movie and the handout on the muscles. Okay.